Start with a gentle, slightly mysterious tone, building suspense. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're diving into a classic adventure with our favorite duo, Tom and Jerry, but with a spooky twist. Settle in, grab some popcorn, and let's begin. It was a dark and misty night, the kind where shadows play tricks on your eyes. Tom and Jerry, completely lost, found themselves stranded in the middle of the countryside. The road was utterly empty, a black ribbon disappearing into the fog. In the distance, thunder rumbled, a deep, menacing growl that promised a storm. Suddenly, a brilliant fork of lightning split the sky. For a split second, the darkness was banished, revealing an enormous, ancient castle perched menacingly on a hill. It was a silhouette of jagged towers and crumbling walls, something straight out of a horror story. Jerry, ever the optimist, pointed a tiny paw toward it. "Maybe we can find shelter there," he squeaked, his voice full of hope. Tom gulped, his fur standing on end. "That place looks creepy," he stammered, his eyes wide with fear. The castle seemed to stare back at them, its windows like hollow, vacant eyes. But just then, the sky opened up. Cold, heavy raindrops began to pour down, drenching them in seconds. They had no other choice. With a shared look of desperation, they made a mad dash for the castle. They ran up the winding, overgrown path, their feet splashing in puddles. Reaching the huge, imposing gates, they braced themselves and pushed with all their might. The gates swung open with a loud, drawn-out creak, a sound that echoed through the unnerving silence. Inside, the air was immediately colder, musty, and filled with the smell of dust and decay. Thick cobwebs hung from the high, vaulted ceilings like ghostly decorations. "Hello!" Jerry called out, his small voice swallowed by the vastness of the entrance hall. The only reply was his own voice echoing back, "Hello, voodoo." Tom's tail twitched nervously, a sure sign of his anxiety. "Let's just find a dry spot," he whispered, "and we get out of here first thing in the morning." Jerry nodded in agreement, though his eyes were wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. They began to wander through the dusty, echoing hallways. The walls were lined with old, faded paintings of stern-faced figures whose eyes seemed to follow their every move. Suits of armor stood like silent, metallic sentinels, and a giant, crystal chandelier swayed slightly above them, even though there wasn't a hint of a breeze. It was deeply unsettling. Of course, Jerry, with his unquenchable curiosity, couldn't help but run ahead. He darted around a corner and skidded to a stop, finding himself in a huge dining hall. A long, magnificent table stretched the length of the room, impeccably set with silver plates, gleaming goblets, and folded napkins, as if a grand feast had just been interrupted. And there, right in the center of the table, sat a giant, perfect wedge of cheese. It was a glorious sight, a golden beacon in the gloomy hall. Jerry's eyes sparkled. "Cheese. Glorious cheese," he chirped, forgetting all about the spooky castle. Without a second thought, he leaped onto the table, his mind set on his prize. But the moment his tiny paw touched the cheese, something bizarre happened. Whoosh! The candles in the elaborate candelabras all around the room flickered to life on their own, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Tom, who had just caught up, froze in his tracks. Jerry," he said, his voice trembling. Maybe that cheese is cursed." Jerry just laughed, his mouth already watering. "Cursed cheese? Don't be silly, Tom. There is no such thing as..." He was cut off when a large portrait on the wall suddenly moved. The eyes of the painted nobleman inside it blinked, then looked directly at them. Both of them let out a simultaneous, blood-curdling scream. Pure panic took over. They scrambled off the table and ran for their lives back down the hallway, knocking over antique chairs and tearing through dusty curtains in their frenzy. Behind them, a heavy oak door slammed shut with a deafening bang. They were trapped. They found themselves in a smaller room, a study filled from floor to ceiling with old clocks and stacks of dusty books. The only sound was the incessant, rhythmic ticking of countless timepieces. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. It was maddening. Then, a massive grandfather clock in the corner began to chime. Dong, down, down, it struck midnight. As the final chime faded, the front of the clock creaked open, revealing a dark, secret passageway. Jerry gasped, his fear momentarily replaced by wonder. A hidden tunnel. Tom sighed, his shoulders slumping. Oh great, because haunted tunnels always end well, don't they? But curiosity, as it often does, won out over fear. Taking a deep breath, they ventured into the tunnel. It was a narrow, stone-walled passage that led deep underground. The air grew colder and damper with every step. Faint squeaking sounds echoed from the darkness ahead. More mice? Tom asked, his ears perked up. Maybe it's a family reunion. Jerry joked, trying to lighten the mood. The tunnel eventually opened into a small, subterranean chamber. And in the center of it, bathed in a soft, ethereal glow, was a treasure chest. It was old and ornate, with strange carvings on its lid. Engraved on a small plaque was a message to those brave enough to face the castle as secret. Tom and Jerry looked at each other, their hearts pounding. Open it. Jerry whispered. Tom shrugged, a flicker of his old bravado returning. Why not? What's the worst that could happen? Famous last words. With a shared nod, Jerry carefully lifted the heavy lid. The instant it opened, the chest didn't reveal gold or jewels. Instead, it exploded with a blinding golden light that filled the entire chamber. And suddenly, they were surrounded by hundreds of ghostly mice, transparent and shimmering, floating all around them. Tom screamed and ran in circles, his tail ablur. But Jerry, though just as terrified, noticed something odd. The ghosts weren't angry or menacing. They were dancing. They swirled and twirled through the air, laughing with faint, high-pitched giggles. One tiny ghost mouse floated over to Jerry and handed him a glowing, translucent piece of cheese. Then, the oldest-looking ghost, who seemed to be their leader, spoke in a soft, whispery voice. Thank you for freeing us. We were trapped for centuries in this castle by a magical curse. Tom stopped running, blinking in confusion. Freeing you? We meant to do that. Of course. Jerry, seizing the moment, gave a dramatic, theatrical bow. All in a day's work, your ghostliness. With a final, warm flash of light, the ghost mice faded away, their laughter echoing for a moment before disappearing completely. Where they had been, the treasure chest now overflowed with real gold coins, sparkling jewels, and, resting right on top, a shining gold medal. Jerry picked it up and read the inscription, to the bravest cat and mouse in history. Tom grinned, puffing out his chest with pride. Finally, some recognition. But his glory was short-lived. The medal shimmered and, right before his eyes, transformed into a mouse-shaped piece of delicious-looking cheese. Mine, Jerry shouted, snatching it instantly and scampering away. Typical, Tom muttered, shaking his head. The chase was on. He sprinted after Jerry, their familiar antics echoing through the now empty treasure room. As their playful chaos continued, the storm outside finally cleared. Moonlight streamed through the castle windows, illuminating the ancient halls in a soft, peaceful glow. The castle was finally at rest, well, until the next disaster inevitably found our favorite cat and mouse. And that's where our story ends. What a wild night for Tom and Jerry. I hope you all enjoyed this spooky tale. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you won't miss our next adventure. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.